Hello all, and welcome to my digital curation project. Before we begin, a couple of things. First of all, for this project I decided to use LibGuides, because I just learned how to use LibGuides last semester in LIS 620, and I really liked it. It's simple enough that you can learn it pretty quickly, but it has enough options that you can do some really fun stuff with it. So, it was a good tool for me to use. The next thing we need to do is talk about the audience for this LibGuide. As you can see, I made my project about fairy tales, and it could be for various different audiences, but for the sake of this project, I'll say it could be kind of an introduction for an educator who wants to use these classic stories to give lessons to kids, to expose them to the stories and to use them as kind of fun teaching tools. And so we'll see more about that in a minute. So part of the purpose of this guide is to teach people the basics, especially if they're already unfamiliar with them, to kind of get them curious to explore more, and to prepare them to pass that information on to other people, especially students if they're in an educational role. So, having said that, we will now move on to the highlights of the guide. As we kind of have here the main page, have my contact information and picture over here on the right side. We have kind of the introduction on the left, just basic introduction. A little poll down here on the bottom for people who are interested in talking about what their favorite fairy tales are. And as you'll see throughout the pages, I put some kind of artwork that is just fairy tale related. There's not a specific correlation between the art and the specifics of that page. So, let's move on. We're going to go through our tabs here. I'm going to go to History. Okay, this is probably the least exciting page visually because it's just information. But I thought it was important to define this because what's a fairy tale? What's a folk tale? What's a romance? Sometimes it seems certain stories go into 2 or 3 categories. So some kind of definition about that, and then some of the major figures that got us to where we are with our modern understanding of fairy tales. So we have down here some information. For example, if I want to learn more about the Brothers Grimm, if it will load. Well, and there we go. We have information from the New World Encyclopedia about the Brothers Grimm, and we can learn more about these guys and what they gave us to fairy tales. Okay, we go back, we do the same for all the rest, but we're going to move on. Then we talk about the stories themselves. What are the actual main fairy tales when we talk about fairy tales? Well, I broke it down into a couple of different ways. A lot of the major collections where we get most of the famous stories, I put over here on the left side in collections. So we have probably the best known of them all, the fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, the tales of Charles Perrault, also very famous, just kind of generic other tales of different countries and languages. In the middle we have fairy tales written by individual authors, so they're not collections, whether anonymously or not. Most of these I have read. I think they're very, very good stories, but not all of them. And then finally on the right we have some kind of modern retellings of fairy tales in children's literature. And I can say the ones I have read, I've read the first 2, The Wishing Spell and The Sisters Grimm, and those are very good, so I would recommend them to elementary or middle school readers. Okay. Move on to multimedia. Okay. Here we could have said a lot because there's a lot of multimedia, a lot of animated shows, a lot of movies, a lot of different things that fairy tales have been used for. But just to keep things pretty simple, some links here to some Disney trailers. Obviously a lot of Disney movies have been based directly or indirectly on fairy tales, and a lot of not Disney movies too. So, and then over here we have, for example, there are a number of really good YouTube channels that give us a whole array of cool fairy tales. Well, that's not going to work. Let's see. Okay, we can see that one's very kiddie, and that's fine. But there's a lot of good stuff. Some of them are more kiddie, some of them are a little bit more mature, but you get the idea. So that's basically that. And that's a little bit more of a light-hearted approach, a little bit more accessible. But then we move on to scholarship. And we have some more scholarly texts for people who really want to understand kind of the history and the nature and want to dig a little bit deeper. Maybe just people who are curious about it, maybe people who are teaching at a higher level, a high school or a college level. I know the essay, Tolkien's essay on fairy stories, has been tremendously influential. Some very, very good material in there. And the others I'm not as familiar with, but I know there's also some good material there too. Also on the left side we have some art, because who doesn't want to see things instead of just read about them? So for example, if I want to view Gustav Doré's works, oh, that's not working right now. Okay, let's try Arthur Rackham's art. That one's not working either. Okay, we'll have to go back and fix those. But here you go, a list of biographical materials. I can go look at any of these artworks here. So the six brothers changed into swans by their stepmother. A bunch of different art like that that has to do with fairy tales. It's really neat stuff. And finally, we talked about education. So fairy tales have been used for years and years and years to teach character. And that's still a good thing. We want to teach character to our young people, but we want to teach them a lot of other things too. Reading, writing, critical thinking. So we have some wonderful books over here on the side that do that kind of thing. There's a gentleman here who talks about how he uses fairy tales to kind of teach kids the various different skills that they need. And then here in the middle we have links to all sorts of direct teaching resources, ideas, lesson plans, all that kind of stuff. Of course, none of these are mine, but I looked through them and some of them look really, really good, really interesting. So I certainly recommend those, and if I were going to teach fairy tales, I would use some of them as well. So that is all of my LibGuide. I hope it has been interesting and informative, and I invite you to do your own research, to explore the resources I have here, and I hope you'll learn something. Okay, thank you for watching.